We will now reconvene at the October 8, 2019 Salem-Keizer School Board regular business meeting. And would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are no agenda. Let's see. Want to do board attendance again. Everybody is here today except for Kathy, who had surgery, and she regrets that she can't be here tonight. And so now we'll move to spotlights on success.
All right, good evening. Our first spotlight is going to be presented by Michael Shields, our Director of Transportation Services.
Good evening. Chair Hyen and the Director of Board of Directors and Superintendent Perry. It's my distinct honor and pleasure to have tonight the Oregon Department of Transportation here is our Community Business Partner of the Month. Recently retired lead dispatcher David Greek had the foresight to set up a partnership when our league was going to be in Bend and Redmond, and knowing that we would have some issues. And if the folks from ODOT would come up, please, and David, if you'd join them, that'd be wonderful. There, gentlemen. So on Friday, August 30th, around 4 p.m., a couple of our buses were carrying students from North Salem High on their way to Redmond for a football game. One of the buses had mechanical problems on Highway 22 near Marion Forks. Turns out that the ODOT crew was close and was there to help and came to rescue. Jose Fuentes and Ricky Pay with the ODOT responded with their service truck to assist our driver, Richard Rouse, to get the bus off the road and into safety, and looked at the problem, went to their shop to get parts, and came back and repaired the vehicle. And with them tonight are Cole Mullis, the Mid-Valley District 3 manager that helped us set up this partnership, and Greg Adams, the manager of the Detroit-Santiam Pass. And for you gentlemen, knowing you might not get a certificate, I have plastic school buses for your office. So please give them a warm welcome. This has been an excellent partnership, one that normally doesn't exist. We give them a call, in particular during the snow weathers. They'll plow the roads and drop some extra sand, so the parents that had concerns about that when we started playing Bend can be greatly relieved. So they keep an eye out for us, and we'd really like to thank them for all they do and congratulate them as our Business Partner of the Month. And Richard Rouse just arrived. In the back, the bus driver that was rescued. Thank you guys.
All right, our next spotlight is going to be presented by Christine Walton, our principal at Crossler Middle School. Welcome, Christine.
Good evening, Chair Hyen, Board Directors, and Superintendent Perry. I'm Christine Walton, principal at Crossler Middle School, and tonight I want to introduce you to social studies teacher and world-class athlete Justin Devereaux, a champion both in the classroom and in the gym. Justin. So last August, Justin won gold at the World Masters Weightlifting Championship in Montreal, Canada. setting the American record with a 370-pound clean and jerk, 370 pounds, making him a back-to-back world champion. What an amazing feat. When he's not competing against the world's best, Justin is working with his students at Crossler Middle School. He says that teaching is his #1 priority, and it really is. And he gets the same sense of satisfaction helping students reach their goals as he does reaching his own. If it wasn't enough that he is a world champion athlete, Justin is a U.S. Marine and was on active duty from 2000 to 2004. He is an award-winning published historian for an article he wrote about wolves in the Willamette Valley. And Justin also coaches young people in weightlifting at Capital City Barbell in Salem. Justin received a lot of love when news of his world championship hit Facebook last August. Dozens of Salem families commented that their students studied with him at Crossler and that he is a great teacher. We couldn't agree more. Congratulations, Justin, on your amazing success that prove hard work pays off.
We'll now have a public comment on agenda items. This section of public comment is for addressing agenda items only. When you come to the podium, please state your name, city of residence, and the agenda item you're addressing for the record. Please remember, each speaker has 3 minutes, and the timer will beep when your time has expired. We want to hear from you, but we ask that you please respect the time limit and speak with courtesy and consideration of the board and the audience. And the first person on the list is Ross, and I'm not going to mess up your last name for you, Ross.
Good evening, Chair Hyen, directors, and Superintendent Perry. My name is Ross Warsenjuber, Salem, Oregon. I'm a parent with 3 students in Salem-Keizer School District. Tonight I'd like to talk about the agenda item 9A or C, the student investment account. I spoke to you last month about this, and I was a little confused after the meeting, so I spoke to my legislators who wrote the law, Senators Frederick and Roebland, and also Representative Alonzo Leon. And they kind of said, yeah, we can't, the Department of Ed's not going to be able to approve the SAI grant until the board approves it. And so basically the confusion for me was we're in the needs assessment process now. And the continuous improvement plan is just the same old one that's been submitted for ESSA since 2015. So the next day I went to the State Board of Ed and listened to Superintendent Gill and Chair Valise talk about how great this community engagement piece was for the process, because there may be some new ideas that come out from the community. So that's kind of what I was excited about, and I still am excited about that, because what we have is an editable document now with the CIP that we can refer back to and see what works and what doesn't. And hopefully the board will assess that and make changes for accountability. So if you take a look at your CIP right now, you'll see that it's full of SBAC benchmarks, Easy CBM benchmarks, iReady benchmarks, and that's been the case for the last 3 years. And I guess what I've submitted to you, 2 pieces, one document stating what evidence-based research is, and that's what these outcome measurements are based on, is evidence-based research. And then that research is based on facts or evidence. And we can develop our own local outcome measurements using this rubric developed by, through the ESSA. And what I'd like to say right now is we can edit that SIP every year, and I'd like to see some accountability on that, because it's been the same program, and our measurement of student achievement supposedly is SBAC scores, and we're at the lowest we've been since we started. So the 5th year of these scores, and we're at the lowest. We've been trying these outcome measurements every year and spending all this money and training, and we're getting less student achievement. And I think we should keep track of that through this next year. And I'll be here to continue to update you on other local measurements that we can try together as a community. Thanks.
Thank you. So that's it tonight for public comment. Now we're on to action items. No, that's at the end. Oh, Sharon? Do you read the proclamation, Hans? Yeah, sorry. We're going to read and vote on hands and words are not for hurting proclamation, and Sharon's going to read it for us.
So whereas a world without abuse and violence is a dream we all share. Whereas we acknowledge that any form of mistreatment of another is abuse. And whereas abuse can be in the form of verbal, mental, or physical, and often escalates to further violence. And whereas we believe that all people have the right to live free of abuse and violence. And whereas we believe that every person can make a difference in stopping abuse and violence by not using violence to control others, by not tolerating any form of abuse from others, and by developing healthy relationships at every age and in all circumstances based on respect and equality. And whereas we recognize and support the efforts of district staff and our community in promoting respect and equality for all people, teaching conflict resolution behaviors, and helping students learn how to stop abusive cycles. And whereas we recognize the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting Project's Purple Hands Pledge is an effective tool in abuse and violence prevention education. Now, therefore, the Board of Directors of Salem-Keizer Public Schools proclaims October 14 through 18, 2019 to be the 22nd annual National Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting Week in the Salem-Keizer School District. We call upon our community to observe October 14 through 18, 2019 as the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting Week, and we encourage everyone in the community to take the Purple Hands Pledge. I will not use my hands or my words for hurting myself or others.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to accept? So moved. A second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then it passes, and I
And
need
we
to-
have a couple people here from the audience, and Linda's going to introduce them, because we have some
Okay.
people from Leslie Middle School.
All right, good evening. It is my privilege to introduce some people to you who are going to share just a few words about the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting proclamation and its effect and impact here in the district. And so I'd like to introduce to you Ashley Rarden, who is a student at West Salem High School, and Pete Teller, who is a counselor at Leslie Middle School.
Hi everybody, I'm Ashley Rarden. I'm a junior at West Salem High School, and I'm a student ambassador for the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting organization. I have seen this pledge be so inspiring in little kids and in parents, and it's incredible the impact that it can have. I've had little kids come up to me and say that they've seen their mommy hit their daddy, and they knew that that wasn't right because of this pledge, and it's just absolutely amazing. And the stories that people have to tell, it's just so cool, because children in schools take this pledge every single day, and they're reminded what's right and what's wrong, and it's just absolutely moving. And I'm so blessed that Ann Kelly has given me the opportunity to be a leader for this organization. Thank you.
Again, my name is Pete Teller, currently counselor at Leslie Middle School, and have been using the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting project since 2003. As a middle school counselor, there's no better way to reach the hearts and minds of our young people than by inviting them to take the simple 14-word Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting pledge. I will not use my hands or my words for hurting myself or others. Grabbing this opportunity is what the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting Week is all about. If promoting kindness is worthwhile, if self-respect and respect for others shows integrity, and if social-emotional learning is as important as academic achievement, then recognizing the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting Week has to be an essential part of our educational curriculum. By accepting the proclamation for the 22nd annual Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting Week, this school board lets every Salem-Keizer student know that they are a valued and appreciated member of our extended family and accepted for who they are without exception. Reciting the simple Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting pledge during Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting Week gives us the chance to stand together, recognizing that we are all valuable, irreplaceable human beings. Thank you for your unanimous support for this amazing community health and personal safety opportunity.
And we are honored and privileged to actually have Ann Kelly with us. Will you take a stand up here? And her husband, Bob. Ann is the founder of the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting organization, and she has brought this tremendous work into our schools for almost 2 decades. Is that accurate? Yeah. So thanks, Ann, for being here. And before I invite each of you to take the pledge with me, I just want to show you that this is something that we have in nearly all of our schools. We include the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting pledge across multiple grade levels, but I want to show you a quick 15-second example that reminds us that it is never too young to start our kids thinking about how we treat ourselves and how we treat those around us. So. There you go. That is a 3-year-old example of the Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting proclamation. So I'm going to invite you to take the pledge with me. It's 14 words long. For those of you who, let me just give you the verbiage before we do it together. I will not use my hands or my words for hurting myself or others. So will you stand? Ann, you want to come up here with me? All right. I invite all of you to say the pledge with me. I will not use my hands or my words for hurting myself or others. Thank you.
Education is the light in the darkness and the voice that breaks the silence. Thank you so much.
You also have a number of little Hands and Words Are Not for Hurting flyers and bracelets in here. So these are great to pass out and spread the word. And your buttons, and your buttons.
All right.
There we go. Okay, now we're ready to get our buttons.
Okay, next we are going to hopefully approve the Disability Employment Awareness Month proclamation. Paul?
Whereas Salem-Keizer Public Schools celebrates all our students and their unique abilities, and whereas nearly 7,000 students receive special education services in our district, and whereas disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the right of individuals with disabilities to experience rich educational opportunities, and whereas Salem-Keizer educators are committed to empowering students with disabilities, and whereas Salem-Keizer Student Services is dedicated to creating supports for children with disabilities, their families, and communities, and whereas our community is better because of the diversity of our population, and whereas inclusion is a core value of our district and we honor our children's exceptional abilities, now, therefore, the Salem-Keizer School District Board of Directors proclaims October 2019 to be Disability Employment Awareness Month and encourages all members of our community to join in celebrating our students with disabilities. And I move that we accept this.
Is there a second? Second by Sharon. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Next, we have the consent calendar. Is there anything that needs to be pulled? Somebody want to make a motion? Paul?
I move that we accept the consent calendar as presented.
Is there a second? Second from Sharon. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next, we have readings. Purchase of Doakes Ferry Road property in support of the 2018 general obligation construction bond.
All right, now I'm introducing David Hughes to walk you through this first reading on this topic. And be sure to address, once he's presented, any questions to him and to me, and we'll see if we can get through the first reading.
Right,
All
good
right,
evening,
David.
Chair Hyan, directors, and Superintendent Perry. As part of the 2018 General Obligation Construction Bond, the district requires the purchase of 1.33 acres of land located at 1755 Doakes Ferry Road, should be northwest, here in Salem. The property supports the capital construction project that's been approved for West Salem High School. All of the due diligence has been completed to the district's satisfaction, and council has reviewed the documentation for this transaction. The appraised value supports the asking price, but I believe you have a document that shows we have an adjustment in the purchase price, a reduction of $22,150 based on the inspection process for a new purchase price of $475,350. This item is presented for a first reading and will come before you for action at the October 22nd, 2019 board meeting with a staff recommendation for the board to approve the purchase of this property at Doakes Ferry Road and authorize the superintendent or chief operations officer as the superintendent's designated to complete this transaction.
Any questions?
Oh, is this the sales agreement that was submitted to the sellers?
I'm sorry?
Is the copy that we have right here the same sales agreement that we sent to the sellers?
Correct, yes.
Any other questions?
Well, there's a few errors on the contract.
Okay.
So like line 43, it should be marked on deed. And then line 7 should be marked buyer exclusively, and line 12 should be marked seller exclusively.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Nope. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
This will come back for a vote before you next month.
Next, we have reports, executive limitation number 5, Head Start and student investment account. Christy.
All right, so Dr. Sproles will introduce our Head Start report.
So good evening, school board members, and I have the honor today to introduce Stephanie Wetzel. Stephanie is our early learning program coordinator, and Stephanie oversees a program that serves over 1,000 of our students and their families. If I'm ever having a rough day, if I ever spend too much time in room with adults, I head over and visit Stephanie, because her program is the tip of the spear for us to welcoming and loving in kids and families into the Salem-Keizer School District. She runs programs all over our district in multiple sites. She manages program sources from a whole bunch of different sources that you're going to get a little glimpse at. She does it all with grace and with ease, and we love up and welcome over 1,000 kids that end up as kindergartners with us the next year. You never get that opportunity to re-welcome a family. And Stephanie and her team does a wonderful job of starting that with us and extending that grace to families as they come in. You all might remember, if you had children who are in preschool, there's nothing riskier than sending off your most precious thing into a classroom that you might not feel comfortable with and you're nervous about. and Stephanie and her team do a great job of welcoming. So you're going to see some numbers today, but at the heart of this is a whole group of people who love up a huge population of kids and welcome them into our district. And I think that's the most important thing to take away. So thanks for what you do, and I'm glad you're here.
Thank you for the introduction. Good evening, Superintendent Perry and member of the board. Thank you for letting us come tonight and share a little bit about our pre-K program. Part of the reason we're here is part of a requirement through our Headstart grant that we share reports for information only a couple times a year with you. So I believe you've received our Headstart report and an annual report. I just wanted to take us through a little bit of information about all of our pre-K programs, including Headstart. So if you think about our programs, as Craig said, we have a variety of programs and funding streams serving over 30 classrooms throughout the district. So if you look at the chart there, it lists out the different programs, funding sources, number of staff, number of students we serve, and budget, and how we're pulling those together to serve students and families. We wanted to talk about a couple of the highlights of things that we're working on. One is we have begun an implementation of early childhood pyramid model, which is the early childhood version of PBIS. What we're seeing from our students is the same as what we're seeing in the elementary schools, is just a real need for social emotional supports with our kids and families. So what we've been able to do is provide staff training and supports and around the social emotional learning. And we know that's such a key for students as we're looking at school readiness, is that they have the skills to be able to self-regulate. See here. Parents, we still have parents calling us every day about trying to get their child into a preschool program. So we just wanted to give you up-to-date as of last week information. So our Head Start program serves 340 students in classrooms throughout the district. As of last week, we had 121 students who are currently on the waiting list. Our Preschool Promise program, we serve 89 students in that program, and we had over 200 students and families on the waiting list. And then if you look there, it talks about the number of students there. We had 130 students who were on the waiting list all year last year who weren't able to receive services. So next steps for us is continuing to look at funding steps and possibilities, including part of that is facility space. So looking at resources around funding and facilities. We also are partnering with our Marion Polk Early Learning Hub as they're working through the same task force looking at the Student Success Act and that process. Any questions for me or anything? But just happy to share information about our programs.
Anybody have any questions for Sean?
Quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned the number of students that had to remain on the wait list last year. I know you've presented the last several years on this. Are we continuing to see an uptick in the number of families that have to wait? Is that number getting bigger?
We do, and especially this year, I think we were surprised at how high we're starting the wait list in September. Usually what we see is that waiting list will grow throughout the year. So it'll start out, 80 and then we'll see it increase as the year goes. But we were surprised this year we're seeing even a bigger increase at that fall.
Satya?
Oh, sorry, I just have,
Oh, you have another, okay.
Sorry. So most of this, my understanding, is either reimbursed or it's title funding, so it's money that comes to us. So it's not it's not based on the amount of need we have. So if we have that great of need, I understand part of it is we just don't have the space for the program. So
and part of it is there haven't been as many opportunities the last few years to apply for additional students. So what happens is the state will, when there is additional funding opportunities, they'll allow programs to apply. And then I think as you can look at waiting lists, that demonstrates the needs of the program. So we would have kind of a really strong case to look for additional funding and supports available when those opportunities come open.
But they haven't been available.
We did not have any. We're hoping that there may be some coming.
But we also don't have the space right now for the additional.
We actually have Catholic Community Services is building a center, and we could have classroom space there, but we don't have the funding for more slots right now. So we actually have 4 classrooms that could be open to us, but we're waiting on more funding. We're keeping a really close eye on the student success dollars, not in the investment account, but in that second bucket, because there's supposed to be more early learning slots.
Right.
And I think we have the most kids on waiting lists across the state and the greatest need, but we'll see how those are allocated.
Thank you. Satya, do you have a question?
So this is very important metrics when it comes to predicting long-term graduation or, the entire trajectory depends on this. So the question I have is, what other child-serving agencies sit with you and collaborate on designing ways to kind of pool the resources in order for this to happen so that we can really start getting more kids into this? Because one of the ways, if they are not emotionally regulated by the time they come to school or they're not able to recognize, it really sets them off the track. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We definitely see that and the need for partnering here in the community. So we work closely with our Early Learning Hub, where there's different agencies are sitting on that group, whether it's Community Action Agency or Willamette ESD or some of our migrant programs are offering supports. And what we try to do is go through our waiting list of families and see, are there programs that someone may qualify for and they're just not aware of, and helping get information out to try to see if we can get as many students as possible to receive services and supports.
And I think we have maxed out our spaces across those collaborative relationships. The preschool promise dollars have to go to the hub, and then they go out to providers, and every provider's preschool promise slots, number one, are already taken up, including in some private home placements. And we also collaborate through our kindergarten partnership and innovation dollars. We tie preschool programs to their elementary feeder system, so there's professional development with our kindergarten teachers. So I think in this region, our collaboration is solid. It's actually a lack of resources for the programs.
Thank
you. Paul?
I was just curious, do we coordinate with Family Building Blocks?
We do. We partner with them, and what we've seen is referring families between agencies. So sometimes we'll have families who could really use a relief nursery support, and so we refer families, and then the same goes with us. So they're referring families who are aging out of some of the programs there into our Salem-Keizer pre-K programs.
Okay, thank you.
Jesse?
I was curious to know if we know how many of the students that are on the wait list end up being able to join the program throughout the year?
So I don't have that number right in front of us, but when we looked at last year, we had quite a few. There were over 100 who weren't able to access any services. So it depends on the program, kind of on mobility, when we have spots open up. It's typically our preschool promise spots, because they are full day and extended hours. We don't see a lot of movement. Once a family gets in, they really want to keep that spot. But our Head Start program, we do see more kids moving in, moving between programs, so spots open up for waiting lists.
Okay.
But I could look at that if you.
Yeah, no, that'd be really cool to see. Because, I mean, if I'm looking at a wait list of 209 students, I'm probably not going to apply unless there's, enough flow of students. So.
Well, and last year, 139 families were on the waiting list the entire year.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I could just imagine how many parents would like to be on the wait list, but don't try.
Any more questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you for your work and the work of your leaders and your staff.
Yes,
You do really good. You do really good
I've got a
work.
couple folks here, and they do a great job.
They do. All right, I went out of order, and I apologize, so we're going to go back to executive limitation number 5, staff compensation and professional development. This is the 5th of 12 monitoring reports for 18-19. I'll start with the staff compensation and professional development. I may not change my own compensation or benefits, and we do have a couple systems in place. I would, if there were any change, that would run through somebody else, not me, for my salary. And the fiscal office has that copy of my contract, and we have an approval process for that. Promise or imply employment to any person in a manner that is outside the district's established process. We have a number of policies I've listed here for you, and I could get any one of them you wanted. I just want to remind you that this is how a concern can be raised. If you have a concern about something, last year we did, it was handed to board leadership, and in this case, board leadership reviewed it and found I was in compliance with my executive limitations. So if there's something you worry about, please pass it to board leadership. Create obligations over a longer term that revenues can prudently project. We have worked hard to negotiate collective bargaining agreements that are in line with what we believe is projected revenue. Of course, that is a bit of a crystal ball at times. As a reminder, we completed with SKEA in 2017, and we'll be we're in a 4-year contract until 2021. And with Ask ESP, we completed in September of 2018 with established salary levels for 5 years through the 2022-23 contract. And we meet with our administrators, confidential, and pro-tech employees in a meet and confer process. Failed to develop and implement a salary schedule and pay plans for employees, all within our collective bargaining rights. We implement those. If we have mistakes, which at times we do, we have a process that those are brought forward. Number 5, fail to develop and implement compensation and professional development plans to attract and retain highly qualified staff. As a reminder, we have a recent MOU that we developed with our classified association that helped us with hiring bonuses for bus driver and referral stipends for staff who refer successful driver candidates. And then I think the rest is pretty standard items. You know, we do try to have a robust professional development program, mentoring for our brand new teachers, and as much as possible within the constraints, a number of supports for people when they start. It often is not enough, and we could always use more especially in the beginning years for multiple employee groups. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
You know, I have reviewed the TEL survey of our state, and we also have a period of initial, so roughly 7 to 8 years is where an ideal mentoring could really benefit teachers when they're starting. How long do we offer, and what mechanism we have to offer to mentor teachers, especially in different parts of our city, let's say North Salem school teachers or McKay school teachers? Is there a way to kind of have teachers from South Salem or West Salem or something mentor, or teachers with more experience be available to take care of the mentoring for at least up to 8 years?
So right now our mentor program, which I still have a funding question about because the mentor grant has expired, but we currently mentor our brand new teachers through year 1 and year 2. And there isn't a financial mechanism in place to mentor. We do some mentoring at year 3. I agree, ideally teachers could have a mentor for as long as they need it, but we don't currently have a good way to pay for that. Teachers are good about being on teams and asking for help within from their colleagues, but rather than in connections that they make and so that they know people, or we have job-alike meetings, they don't always ask for help clear across the community, partly because there's the accessibility. But right now we don't have a financial mechanism in place that would allow us for 8 years of mentoring.
So just a clarifying thing. So what is our turnover rate? What is the peak when teachers kind of leave the job or feel that this is not my cup of tea and leave, and comparatively? Because there's about a third of them will leave by 5 years or so, I'm told.
So the first answer is which isn't quite your question. I know that our beginning teacher mentor program actually helps teachers get through the first couple of years. And we have a lower rate of loss for those very beginning than districts without a mentor program. That being said, do you know any statistics around?
Yeah, in general, the attrition rate for licensed staff on an annual basis averages around 10%, which is about 5% lower than the national average.
And that attrition rate includes retirements as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Jesse?
Hey, while we're on the mentor train, I would, do we have a plan for how we're going to fund the mentor program? Or is it, what do we know so far?
I am working hard to get the, right now, the mentor dollars are going into what's called the Educator Advancement Council. And they are doing meetings, or they're doing, pushing that money out through what's called a Regional Educator Network, so a REN. And the REN in this area is Willamette ESD. And they are to serve all of Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County. And all they have right now is their startup funds. So it's this shift in the state. And I am pushing them hard to get their governing council up and running so they can get a plan for expenditures. If not, I'll come to you with a budget request of contingency. And I will, just because we have to have this for our teachers, or we'll lose them.
Yeah, when do you think we'll know?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew.
Fair enough.
Can I ask a clarification? So, sorry, Christy, on that, so part of that plan from WSD is to meet the requirements for Student Success Act, correct? Are they getting additional dollars?
That's a separate additional dollars to Willamette ESD. Okay. So we have the REN, and their job is to look at professional development from brand new teacher to veteran teacher and come up with a plan. And embedded in that is the mentoring dollars. The second piece of your question is around the Student Success Act dollars. They have been given dollars for technical assistance around the Student Success Act. And we just engaged them on Friday, and the research team is actually going to help us with all our stakeholder engagement so that they can collate surveys, take in stakeholders. So they're going to be the research part of our task force. From WESD with the dollars they're getting from the state around the student investment account.
All right, I think we're done with those questions. Student investment account, SAI
All right, so I'm going to move on to the student investment account task force. What you have in your packet and I'll try to do an update every meeting because we're meeting often enough that it will be good to just keep you in the loop of this. So this is the task force membership. Adriana and Reginald are our co-chairs, and we've tried to get a wide representation from our community and from our staff. So step one was standing up a task force. They are 2 meetings in right now, and next page shows you the charge. So we've held our 2 meetings. We have 3 more meetings on the books. And in the first 2 meetings, we really reviewed the charge. And then last meeting, we began to get into what does the data say about our students. And we're really looking at outcome gaps. So the task force is getting into groups based on the subgroups that have the lowest population or graduation rate. So that is our African American Black students, our Native American, Alaska Native, Pacific Islander, economically disadvantaged, and then emerging bilinguals is another category we have to look at, and students with disabilities. So they're in groups, and they're really right now we're trying to understand the data and what it tells us about our students. And we're going to keep working on that. We have another meeting Monday night, and the majority of the meeting will be around data. The question did come up, could we have somebody from the board kind of be the process observer of this, to be kind of your liaison as well? And Paul has offered to do that for you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, congratulations,
Yes,
Director Kylo.
You volunteered, I remember that clearly.
We still have, our intent is that we will bring recommendations to you in January, and I'll just keep you posted along the way. The goal is solid recommendations, even if it takes a little bit more time. The input you got tonight, and there's been some other input along the way. We had a letter to the editor around art. Anything that comes in to you as input or into me as input, I'm just putting before the task force. So the handouts that you got tonight will go to the task force in their electronic file, and we'll teach Director Kylo how to use his electronic file. Didn't know that part, did you? Yep. So we will pass on every bit of feedback you get or we get, and I have people, emailing here and there about that. I think I'll open it up for questions there about the task force.
So it's not a question, but it's a comment. So having seen what some of the other districts around the state are doing to fulfill this requirement, I just want to compliment you, Superintendent Perry, and your staff for the approach that you're taking. You always engage the community and put together an amazing list of people who are on this task force and are taking this very seriously and starting with data. I mean, how wise is that? I've seen other districts who have issued a Survey Monkey and just put it on their website, not even advertised it, or so there's a requirement, but I think we're doing what is the intent behind getting community feedback, but really identifying where the needs are. So thank you for it's time consuming, but thank you.
It is, it's going to be a really good process. It is really time consuming, but it's the right work. And they'll do their engagement. The way we're thinking about engagement is both all staff, all community, but then really targeted focus group engagement, especially for our families who have gaps in their achievement. So we'll do really targeted focus group with those kids and families. We've this week looked at attendance data, and some groups of students have much lower attendance than others. So we'll ask some of those questions as well when we're out in the community. So we will learn things by really slowing this down that we didn't know about our kids and families that I think will help us set a good course. So thank you for that.
Satya, you have a question?
Thank you very much. So, when I look at this outcome data that you're trying to do with this task force, this is a time, it's not a standing committee as you explained to me last time. But then when you take this and then start looking at how do we operationalize equity and make it such that we can have a way to measure and demonstrate that we are heading in that direction. My question is, is there a mechanism in real time for the board to hear some of these data to see how we are making progress on a, say, 12 months, kind of a trend line, so that we can really start seeing, are we heading in that direction, rather than waiting for this committee to give us a report, and then over time we have no way to know if we are making progress in that direction, or some of these outcomes kind of overlap with each other. I would like to see it in terms of ongoing basis, because one of the premise in which our governing board works is looking at it from the point of view of equity and getting everybody to think. So is there a mechanism where we can hear about this data like a dashboard on a regular basis, rather than waiting for end of this committee giving us a report at one time report? But that won't help me much in terms of seeing, and it won't help the community to hold us accountable to say, are we making progress? If so, what is back? And we do have data over years. It's not like we don't have it.
Well, this committee is, do we only have the 5 meetings for this? Or is it intended to be extended past those?
It'll be extended past those.
Yeah.
Danielle?
So
I agree with Director Chandagiri about getting updates as to kind of where the pulse of the conversation's going. Are there meeting minutes that are posted somewhere for each of these meetings for the public to gain access to, including ourselves? And if so, where?
Yeah, we have not publicly posted those, but we certainly can, and we'll get them up on the website. I don't know if they will have enough trend data in them for the minutes, but how about we bring to you some of our data statements as we get them? So if, as the teams work and they begin their data statements, let me weave those into my board reports, and then they'll be publicly available too, so that then you can ask questions about the data and where we are. I just don't, we're not putting every single detail into the minutes. They're a little bit more general than that.
I'd like to see the minutes as well. I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's important for those of us who are interested in the conversation to know who's leading those particular points, and to make sure that the areas of the community that are reaching out to us are being reflected in that conversation. And if not, we can direct those individuals to members of this task force to engage those conversations, those points are brought forward.
Yeah, I think it was a both and was my comment. Yes, the minutes and the, I could bring some data statements forward each time so that you're kind of seeing the trends that we're looking at in this report.
Okay. I have another question, but I didn't know if he got his answer.
That's not quite the dashboard he's looking for.
Yeah, my way of looking at it is, for me, a one-time data doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
I look at it in a 12-month trend line, because then only we can really start understanding, is this a trend? Do we catch it before it becomes a critical point? And then what kind of interventions we should put in place so that we can get those kids back on the trajectory. If you really look at the ODE data that came out that way, every community is not really reaching that state expected benchmark. So then we start kind of understanding, is there, because we got 12 years of kids showing up. So I got 12 years to do what I want. So how do we start catch early, like we heard the early head start? Do we intervene there? Do we start thinking in terms of transition early on? Is there an overlap between bilingual, emerging bilingual learners, or how do we kind of use the data in a way that's meaningful? That's the only reason I asked. It's like if your blood sugar keeps going up, don't wait for kidney fails, then say, oops, you had diabetes before.
Yeah.
Danielle?
So, are you comfortable with getting the reports during the superintendent's reports?
Yeah, at least like a trend, if you can just, it doesn't have to be a detail for me. Yeah. As long as it's just like a trend line, break it down according to these variables in the same measure. That will be a little bit helpful for me.
Okay.
Danielle?
Can you tell me how this task force was built?
Yeah, so we got a number of inputs into it. So we, first of all, talked about who were going to co-chair that, and I reached out to board leadership along that. And then a number of people kind of brainstormed list of people, and we got input all along the way. So we started with a list, and then SKEA said, could we add these people? Then even recently Ask ESP said, hey, we wonder if you still need this person on here. And then a number of people suggested community members. So it was a little bit of came at us from multiple directions in trying to narrow down the list. Our goal was to be sure that we represented our underserved students, because the goal of the Student Success Act is to close gaps. So what you don't see here is we have representation from our Hispanic community, our Pacific Islander community, teachers, elementary, middle, high. We have representation of LGBTQ, Marshallese, students. We don't have a student with disability, but we have teachers that teach students with disabilities on here. So we tried to be sure that every subgroup that is called for in the Act is represented.
Who's representing the students navigating homelessness population?
Who? Todd, who is Marion County Child Welfare, and Brittany, Salem for Refugees. And that will be one of those groups that will do some intentional outreach to, probably through focus groups, with our students navigating homelessness.
Okay, I'd like to be a part of that conversation when it comes about.
Okay.
As far as that outreach.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that is a good place now and then on some of our focus groups to just come in as one board member and be a listener there. I think that would be really helpful to you to get context.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Christine? Okay, let's take a 5-minute before we continue on. Under information, we have our Board and Budget Committee meeting schedule. It's in your packet. The next Community Bond Oversight Committee meeting, CBOC, is Tuesday, October 29th, 5:30 at North Salem High School. If you come, bring your no, you don't need to bring your hard hat, but wear boots, because I guess we're touring north in construction. And now we'll move on to public comment. Just wait, I'll give you directions. It's okay. It's all right, we don't bite, I promise. It's time now for non-agenda items, public comment. This section of public comment is for addressing topics not related to the agenda. Please state your name, city of residence, and the topic you are addressing for the record. Each speaker has 3 minutes, and the timer will beep when your time has expired. Again, we want to hear from you, but we ask that you please respect the time limit and speak with courtesy and in consideration of the board and the audience. So first on the list is Michael Polak. You can tell me how to say that correctly.
Grandma says Polacek. So
okay.
stick with what Grandma says. Thank you.
Grandma's always right.
Grandma is right. That's right. Chair Hayden, directors, and Superintendent Perry. My name is Michael Polacek, and I'm from Salem. I'm going to talk on suicide prevention. I have had kids, grandkids, and currently have great-grandkids in the Salem-Keizer School District. I'm also president of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention Board of Directors for Oregon. I attended last month's public work session and admire the great efforts of the mental health team to put together a suicide policy on such short notice. It's a perfect framework for a comprehensive program. The district must now immediately implement that policy. The state of our kids' mental health is unacceptable. 1 in 5 8th and 11th graders have seriously considered suicide over the last month. 1 in 10 have attempted. Every 5th kid you see at school is at risk for dying. And we must immediately attack this like a mama bear. I realize that over the past year and a half, the district has made gatekeeper training a priority for the staff. And I'd like to know the number of people that have been trained so far on the staff. As far as the district's concerned, I'm not sure if those numbers are available, but I would like to know how many people have actually been trained so far. This is a model policy and program developed by a joint team that included the American School Counselor Association, the National Association of School Psychologists, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and the Trevor Project. It's not new, and it's been tested nationally. A best practice identified in this program is that the school district established a standing suicide prevention task force in conjunction with adopting a suicide prevention policy. The task force must include a blend of district administration, parents, teachers, mental health professionals, representatives from suicide prevention organizations, representatives of vulnerable populations such as LGBTQ and immigrants, as well as general experts in youth mental health. The purpose of the task force would be to inform the district administration and school board regarding suicide prevention activities and policy implementation, and to keep aware of current research data, trends, and evolving best practices. The task force can also help compile and maintain a list of community resources to assist with suicide prevention activities and referrals to community mental health providers. Finally, the task force would help to determine minimal data points that would articulate outcomes from interventions and progress towards zero suicide. Because this topic is so urgent, I'd like the board to establish a standing task force as soon as possible. Because there's already a very close relationship with the district and the community, I think a reasonable date for establishing at least a core of this task force would be by the next board meeting in November. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tisha Roll. Now it's your turn.
Sure. Okay, so I have 3 things to talk about. Hat policy regarding you guys have in the dress code, the breathalyzer test, and then like the $58 million bond you have. The hat policy, I think, is a safety concern, safety issue, because it's difficult to identify anybody coming in and out of your school, and it's also, I couldn't imagine how that would impede on like teacher-student engagement. The breathalyzer is not a safety concern, that's risk. Parents can observe and protect their kids from driving. Since you guys have implemented it 1 year ago, none of your children have tested positive for alcohol use. And it's more of a policing matter. It doesn't belong in the schools. I think it's more used, like if it did belong in the schools, then you guys are using it just to criminalize students, and I don't appreciate that. And then as far as the $58 million bond goes, I understand that you guys are gonna be like using that money just to build onto schools and demolish schools that are already standing. But I think that you could keep the schools unless there's like a health concern, clearly. But with regard to the environment of the school, but you need to divert those funds into building smaller schools that are more manageable for staff and students to learn in, because I mean, kids just like, there are 2,100 students in South Salem High, and I think they're only built for 1,900 maybe. But regardless, I'm speaking as a community and parent, a community member and parent, but my son has gone to like some of these ginormous schools. They're completely disconnected. Nobody's on the same page. I, as a parent, have never did figure out how to follow like any of their websites that they refer your kids to cite their homework and everything else, which is more like based off of a college model and a syllabus, which our kids aren't in college. I know we need to get them ready for college, but they're not in college and in school. They should be in school, not already in college. So that irritates me big time. And then with regard to, oh yeah, and then I was just, it's always like a concern with regard to money, because that's just not very transparent to the public with regard to how much money does the school get to maintain the building? You know what I'm saying? Like computers and getting new desks, new chairs. I mean, just things that are just kind of like, I don't know, minor, but still very important.
Thank you. Anna Olivia.
Good evening, everybody. I want to talk about suicide also, and I appreciate the former testimony. That's a pretty amazing idea. And I just wanted to tell you that when I couldn't come last session on the 24th, but watched it, I was really pleased to see how much you already were doing and the districts was working hard on. And I do think it's kind of like you got the credit in the news as one of the best in the states, making that progress and getting this going. So what the other person testified about getting a task force, the more things, the better. And I know you have a lot on your plate right now, but it is a huge issue. And I'm just really glad that there's so much happening, and I really enjoyed listening to some of the department leaders that I don't know very well. I remember David and Ishan, I believe it is. So that was really neat. Now, what I wanted to say, oh, by the way, and I'm really happy that you did such a huge climate survey of so many students and that you're going to do the rest. So that was fabulous. And then you're going to do parents. So I do want to talk a little more about that too, probably to David, about how many parents. What I'm going to talk about is that Salem-Keizer Coalition for Equality has been doing a lot with our parents. From 10 years ago when we were talking about completely different things, and today that's what parents are asking us for is mental health, more about behavior, suicide, what's wrong, how do I help my child at home also. And what we're finding, of course, is that there's hardly any access to Spanish-speaking mental health providers. And so it made me realize that because our kids had so many disparities in 20, 25 years ago, there was, I know these kids, they're adults and they have kids and we talk, and they just sat around and being confused for years and didn't have any real ESL education or anything, and it was hard for them to keep their Spanish if their parents weren't really diligent at home. And now they're all grown up, and back then there was very few Latinos that were graduating and going to college, and they were ready for college. I had kids that were graduating from high school, not being able to read and write well enough to get into Chemeketa. So it was really discouraging. I'm thinking that's why we don't have very many local Latino professionals here, because they did not succeed 20 to 25 years ago. So that's my pitch. We've got to succeed with them now.
Thank you. Cheryl Corning.
Hello, Superintendent Perry and board members. My name is Cheryl Corning, and I represent a group in Salem called Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense. And I wanted to make you aware of a program that we offer. It's called the Be Smart program. And Stephanie Hull, who heads up our Be Smart program, is here. And it's a program that is focused on safety, and especially safety for children. We know that a gun in the home can result in very, very sad consequences if there are children in the home. And this program is available. Stephanie actually offers it. And I just wanted to make that known to you. This is kind of off the cuff. This is my first school board meeting, but we're hoping to come back and be before you. We've already met. We actually met Director Chantkari at the Out of Darkness Walk, because we tabled there and found that there was quite a need, quite an interest in this program. So this is us, as you see. Some of us are here. So we hope to make ourselves known at other board meetings. And thank you for being so hospitable to us.
Thank you. And that is it for tonight's public comment. We'll start with board activity report. Paul, you want to start it off? Danielle.
I have one thing. First, I'd like to say thank you to Linda Myers, who did such a great job leading the ribbon cutting at CTEC a couple of weeks ago for the last phase of the CTE developments. Here, I see you hiding over there behind John. You did great behind that microphone. I had the privilege of participating in both my roles as the director of the Chamber of Commerce and a school board director. And my counterpart, Tom Hoffer, who's the CEO of the Salem Chamber, attended. And so if you don't know, agri-science is open, and so is culinary. And if you have not taken the time to go over there and tour, I'm pretty sure Linda Myers would love to lead a tour, and she'll take you on it. She's an expert. They made great food. There were students there that were handing out different appetizers. And I have to say that there's nothing better than seeing private-public partnerships, businesses stepping forward to really advance education in a way that's really interesting to students today. My son was a student at CTEC for a period of time, and I just think it's profound, and there can't be enough said about how amazing that program is and what this community is doing for our kids. So CTEC all day, take a tour, there's new things to see.
I'll go last. Satya?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Perry, I have to share a good news. And I really appreciate your leadership for creating that right atmosphere where I had the privilege of being there when one of your students started a nonprofit and Live to Tell. And this all student-led board, which really is going to be revolutionizing the way we are going to address stigma. Probably, at least to the best of my knowledge, this is the only one of its kind I know in our state. Maybe I'm wrong. But they have done an amazing job of student-led board. They have students from all diverse background and different high schools. They want to have little clubs in middle schools and high schools throughout our district to start with. They want to be sitting in the table and participating in what Mr. Michael Polachek talked about, how we can participate in this. They are probably going to be more effective in addressing stigma, making it cool to talk about issues of suicide and needing help or and help go upstream. I truly believe it will help us achieve all other outcomes we are looking for, prevent dropout and attendance and everything else. So I really appreciate that, and I got this opportunity. The second part is I spent some time with Dr. Kelly and his wife on Hands Are Not for Hurting. And I want to formally ask, Madam Chair, if you would consider, it's time for us to have a work session on addressing this bullying and violence prevention so that we can really tie all these issues together. We had 3 children. I read that they were arrested in one of the high schools, and that is an example. And there are other examples of violence in school that has been a big issue. So I think it ties in with these topics. And so I would like to see if we could have a session to address this. And there is, it all comes under the safety. They're kind of part of the same issue. So thank you very much.
Sharon?
Okay, so just a couple things. I also attended last night's kickoff event at South, and it was just absolutely phenomenal, and Linda was there, and it is a group of students, student-led, and you all got to meet Eric last time, but just the fact that it's student-led and it's student voices, and there's a lot of conversation last night by local leaders about it really has to be student-led, because as adults we think we have all the answers and we really don't. We probably create more problems than answers, so it was really exciting to see that and be a part of that. So, but I too want to echo the environment that you've created in the district, and district staff and leadership and administrators like Laura, the principal at South, who really advocates for student ingenuity, whether it's, raising money to start up a shower for homeless in Salem. We have students who are doing the work of adults, and thank goodness they are. And then shifting gears, I attended the SCEF Board of Directors meeting today. First time I'd been at we'd had a meeting with the new director of SCEF, so Kelly Carlisle, there at SCEF, which is just super exciting. I know the SCEF board has, hung in there the last 2 years through all of that change and transition, and the board members are committed, and they're really pleased with the direction that SCEF is headed. There's still a lot of rebuilding that's going to be taking place and reanalyzing the role and the mission of SCEF. And I liked what I heard the director say today. What is our purpose in the community, and what does the community and the district need from us versus what have we been doing for the last several years that has not addressed the needs of the community, which is really the needs of the students. So hearing Kelly talk about that and seeing the excitement and enthusiasm around that. So there's been a lot of hard work the last year, but I think they're headed in the right direction. So.
Jesse?
Well, typically this is where I list you all of the schools I've visited this month, but I didn't do as much of that this month. This year, well, so far I've been working really hard at building myself as a leader, figuring out how can I better represent the students of our district, and how can I work harder to listen to a lot of the stakeholders in our community, so that way I can represent people to the best of my ability. And so I've spent a lot of my time meeting with local leaders and meeting with community members, as well as I'm learning Spanish, so that's pretty neat. I can now talk about what I like to do, so that's fun. As far as like actual things we went and did, I went to the CTEC launch of our agriculture program, and that is awesome. If you guys haven't checked out CTEC yet, I highly recommend doing it. So not only do we teach these kids applicable skills to the real world, but these are actual services that they will provide to you. So you can go to CTEC and you can get your hair done, you can get a facial, you can get your nails done, you can get your oil changed, you can do them both. In fact, they'll feed you while you're there, while you're at it. And yeah, and it's fantastic. And when you go get the tour, I mean, these students will come up to you and they'll shake your hand, they'll look you in the eye, say hello, and they'll be the ones giving you the tour. It's fantastic, and it really shows a great representation of our district and a lot of the work that we're doing, and just getting kids ready for the world. Also, was at the launch last night for the nonprofit started by local students at South Salem High School. And, oh man, it was so great. Just talking to these kids, I mean, some of them are sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school, and they're all on the board of a nonprofit, starting this together and mobilizing students, mobilizing other students to get involved and take action. And I just think it's not only really honorable, but it's really inspiring to us because I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, I was not going to listen to anybody over like 30, right? And so to have their peers be the ones telling them, hey, this matters and this is important to talk about is phenomenal. And so it just really shows the maturity of those students and in the ability for these students to grow and to help us grow, really. So I just wanted to give them a shout out and say, what's the name of it is Live to Tell. So you should go follow them on Instagram and Facebook, because what they're going to be doing is telling people how to get involved and what you can do.
Well, unlike Jesse, I don't list the schools I've visited, but I did go to McKay recently. And even though the student population is about almost 300 less than it was a year ago on the same date, it's still pretty crowded. And I look forward to the time when the boundary changes are fully implemented and our bond work is done, the $19 million bond, so that our kids have some space to breathe. And just to let you know, our next work session on October 22nd, it's going to be a little different. It's going to be starting at 5, I think. Alice, is that right? Correct. 5. And it's going to be a 3.5, 4-hour work session where we're going to finish what we started in August, which is our board policies and government's policies. We're going to try to get through that. And then also, just for the record, anybody that knows me knows that bullying issues are near and dear to my heart. There will be a work session at some point. We don't have a date selected at this point, though. That's it. Christy?
All right, thanks. I'll just make a couple comments. I think it is my microphone isn't the best. I'm sorry. Usually I'm the loudest. And I think it's cutting in and out tonight. Since David Hughes is in the audience, I just wanted to do a shout out to David and also to Joel Smallwood. While construction is tricky for schools to have session, it's going on. So school's going on, construction's going on, and that's in no small part to both David and Joel's leadership. So if you would would pass that on to Joel, that would be great. So thank you, and thanks for your work with us tonight. On the subject of students, we actually have another South Salem High School student who at some point I would love you to meet. He spent a whole hour with cabinet leaders talking to us specifically about the issues that our transgender students face. And boy, that 15-year-old has got it together and is incredibly bright. He spent most of the time helping us understand the definitions around gender issues and gender fluidity. And he is one of our students who has transitioned both socially and physically. And again, if you had a chance to meet him, it would really, you would be so incredibly impressed. So just a reminder, on the days when you wonder why you're here, step into a school, and our kids teach us lots about how we educate. So that was an hour of time that felt like it went by in about 5 minutes. And then finally, our community transition program was at the Capitol this week, and they had a kind of job fair, services fair on the Capitol Mall. And just a big shout out to Melissa Glover, who continues to push for those community partnerships for our community transition program students. So those are 18 to 21-year-old students who are students with disability that we're teaching life skills, job skills to until they're 21. And Melissa has really just brought more and more programs and services to those students. So that was very fun to have them on the Capitol steps, and we did a proclamation. The director, Colt Gill, was there as well. And then the kids had time out in a career fairish type thing on the Capitol lawn. So that's all I have for my comments tonight.
We are adjourned.